sorry.
Welcome to the joint meeting with the commissioners and the delegation. And is it worthwhile introducing? Everybody knows everybody. We're okay? So thank you. We have an agenda, and of course, we can do anything we want. But if we can start with the agenda.
Who's this new person next to Joe?
Sorry?
Who's this new person next to Joe?
You guys don't know her?
Different energy.
Bring some color to
Hey.
this. Right?
We're open. I shouldn't say are they allowed to be smart asses because we're
Better
open.
than dumb ones.
You've said worse.
It's like Mary Poppins walking into a bank boardroom. That's great.
Magic, right?
That's right.
Roberta, do you have copies of the annual request?
Yeah. That's some sort of. So each year, we've done this, done this before, for several years now. We've sent a letter to the Secretary of Budget and Management. The state says it backwards from what we say, so I always have to stop and think what the state's title for that department is. Putting forth requests that, where we would like the state to help with funding some of our county-funded CIP projects. So you'll see the first three are sort of things you've seen before: the state's attorney building, the law enforcement building, and the public safety training center, and the stormwater. The fourth one, if I may, and I might lean on Commissioner Guerin here as well, is a little different. This is not specifically a county request, but a request for the state to reinstate funding that had been in a loan fund for our, for the R, and I mean that in the big R, Maryland's volunteer fire companies. They've reduced that funding this year, and that's put a very significant strain on our local volunteer fire companies, and we're sure that that has put also a strain on other state volunteer fire companies across the state. So as you see, they've reduced it to $4.3 million in FY26. And you know, when a regular fire truck costs about $1 million, that'll buy maybe 3, maybe 4 if they're really lucky. So, and that's across the entire state of Maryland, which really doesn't help us very much. So we would love to have that funding reinstated. Let me ask Josh a question. Josh, do you know this money that was taken out, do you know if it was taken out in the BRFA bill? Or was it deliberately taken out temporarily? Because that fund's been there for a long, long time.
Yeah, I don't know that answer. Wish I could, but I'll certainly, and it wasn't, this didn't come up as like a primary topic at any point that I remember last year.
Well, they probably didn't know it. I mean,
What
the
was
Maryland Firemen's Association, and I said one of the things, they should get them all to try to bring it back collectively from the Firemen's Association, but it might have happened as one of those 1,000 cuts in the BRFA bill. And just one more, I call it the big beautiful state bill, which wasn't big and beautiful, and nobody really knew what was in the cuts in the BRFA bill.
Yeah.
So,
What was the total number before? Do you know what how much did they cut?
I don't know, sorry.
Yeah.
Good.
But Ms. Wyndham, she actually portrayed it accurately. I'm going to be speaking with ESAC about this issue because obviously what we want to do is inform our, the local volunteer organizations statewide, make sure they're understanding of this, see what they can do to push this bill to a better place, but obviously engage as many people as we can in Carroll County about this bill, and that if there's an opportunity to change it, now is the time to start having those discussions. So we'll do what we can here in the grassroots side, but certainly statewide, I would imagine a lot of volunteer organizations would be willing to get on board with this potential change because it's accurate. 4.3 million. If you're lucky, you might get 3. I mean, these vehicles are so expensive now. Roughly about 2.5 million, my understanding, for a engine. It could be up to 2.5 million. So.
There's no legislation needed. I mean, it's already there. It's just got to be increased in the budget and kept there for what it was.
Let's just make sure Mako has it on their list of things. So it's more broader.
Good point.
Thank you.
And I'm not sure, Roberta, I heard everything you said, but the big deal of this was the interest rate. And so without this, the volunteer companies want to review our loan process, which was a pass-through, so it wouldn't be that low of an interest rate. And if they go taxable and other things, they're probably going to cost more.
I don't even think, my understanding is this wasn't even a bond program. It wasn't similar to ours. This was just funding that they then lent to, state funding, like cash, that they lent to the fire company.
It was a loan or a grant?
It was a loan.
And they just had a good interest rate on it? Is that,
That's
Not
my
forgivable.
understanding.
And not forgivable.
I don't know. I'm sorry. I don't know all the details. We can, you know, I'm sure the volunteers, I personally wasn't aware of this program until it was cut. And then that put so much pressure on the volunteers that they started rightly looking for other sources, including the county. And so we'd like to help them out in every way we can, this being one of them.
On these other items, generally, I think, I don't know what you all have heard or talked about. I think generally, the way it's worked under the Moore administration, they will usually want to, it's been a little murky, but they usually want to see support from the delegation if it's going to get into their, just they want to know that your delegation signs off on it. Doesn't mean you'll get it, but it means, you know, without it, I think they want to have some backup. Just speaking for myself, I don't see anything wrong with any of these things. We did get funding before for the law enforcement building.
Yes.
Doesn't mean you can't go back and ask for more.
And we've also gotten some for the Public Safety Training Center.
Yes, we have. So, I mean, it could be that either or both of those could be options to try to get something. I wonder, or the state's attorney building, how far along, the state's attorney building we had a groundbreaking on, where are we at as far as paying for both buildings, the law enforcement and the state's attorney building?
How do you mean paying?
Well,
They're
how
in our
much money?
CIP.
You're on your books to
Yeah,
do
oh,
it.
yeah.
So
In fact,
this
all
is-
these, well, not the volunteer.
Right.
Number 4 is, I say, a bit of a unicorn relative to the other 3. But
Yeah, sure.
yeah, these projects are all in the board's CIP. And
Okay.
some have been and some continue.
So and the process is ongoing as you make payments when you make payments, and yeah, gotcha, okay, no, that's good. Yeah, I think these are all, to me they all look good. I mean, is there, and you're saying, number one, state's attorney building is your number one priority, because you're probably less so far along on that one than you are on the others? Or
Farther along on that.
Further along on it, okay.
and Josh, I don't get to see the grants come through, but I always wonder how much we should ask for. And do you ask for a reasonable amount, or do you ask for a lot and they say they give you half? And it depends on the governor, but should we ask for more and then when they give us half, say, oh, we got what we wanted? I mean, how much asks do we have? And they'll say, we gave you your number one project, but it's 3, and they ask for 15 for something next door. How do we make sure of that?
So you ask for as much as you really want, and then there's an understanding that has, from our side, around what really makes it, what's palpable to help you in your budget. So if it's negotiated down, we know where, like, you ask for 4, I'm making this up, but really, 2 would be a win, then let's make sure we know that 2 is still a win, and we'll still push for 4.
So is that how you, I mean, I just saw this earlier, is that how you sort of, you'll be happy with half of this, or should we start with a higher number and be happy with the 3? Or whatever the number is, because they usually say, oh, we gave you half, and I just want to make sure, you got to ask, and sometimes we try to be nice and conservative and ask for what we really need, but that's not the way it.
It all depends on the other side. If you're shooting long distance, aim high and hope you drop it in, but you never know how the other side's reacting.
I don't know, this governor.
I mean, I think what you're doing, this is the letter you sent, right?
We will be sending.
We'll be
yeah.
sending it. To me, and this is where you guys, once you send this, you'll need to lobby, use whatever resources you guys have with legislative liaison to really work your relationships in the administration, and we of course want to help with that. I would say it's probably okay to have it the way you have it, because you're saying, hey, this is the full project, and then we're asking for, they're not gonna give you more than 3 million, so I think that's probably okay. Sometimes it depends on, I think it's good you guys tell them what the total project is, so they know you're not asking for you to pay for all, obviously pay for all of it, you're just asking for some help. Some of it also depends on, whether it fits into the Moore administration, similar to the Hogan administration, in the sense that does it fit into the administration's larger political goals with how they fund things? And I can't speak to whether this would or not.
Right.
Obviously, things like, some things we did, a couple things we've done in Westminster have been, it fits into economic development goals. So if it's helping to grow jobs, in the past, we were able to get some help, on different things under the Hogan administration, because they're like, hey, what's gonna help us grow more jobs, So in this case, obviously, public safety, I would hope would be something they want to be able to plant their flag and say. The other thing is if you have something, and I don't think any of these qualifies this, but if you have something that's like, hey, we can do a ribbon cutting next year if we get this funding, that also benefits. Most of our stuff is longer range and larger, which is fine, but.
We could do a ribbon cutting if it's the state's attorney building in a year and a half. How's that? Not quite a year.
Oh, understood, yeah. You were saying.
Yeah.
Give us 18 months or maybe 20.
Yeah.
I think the critical thing is really what you just said, though, right? Like making sure we have an awareness and they have an awareness of timelines, because once the shovel's done, I guess so to speak, or the last nail's hammered, it's like good luck getting that funding.
Yeah.
So just when we're doing that, I think it's even important we know, so that like tranche that level of funding towards stuff that has a longer lead time.
I'm sure we can discuss internally as a delegation, but I'm assuming we all be happy to be like, yeah, we're supportive of these. These are good requests, and
Thank you.
would help.
What about things not in the letter? Are there certain things we should push for? I think, and I could be wrong, Hampstead got PFAS money from somebody. Individual fire companies get money. Is there something else that's the niche, the shiny penny to ask for now that we should add to this?
No, I think that the areas.
No shiny penny.
No, I think the areas, the groups that have, the county folks or the city folks that have gotten more money, have invested in lobbyists. And I know I've shared that with you before, and I'm not talking about with us, but I'm talking about broadly, and that and the squeaky in the governor's budget, and this is Republican and Democratic administrations, so that's not a partisan statement. The squeaky wheel, whatever the old saying is, like you gotta evaluate how you wanna spend your money, but that's your call. But, Westminster City has probably spent some, invested some, and they've probably seen a tenfold investment from the governor's office because of it.
And I've seen some, Frederick City is kind of similar in some things they've done. And
Yep.
so you just have to think about that. I do want to.
St. Mary's County, to give you a county that's done it.
They
Mary's
do.
County does
They
that.
do.
Yeah.
I do want to thank you that this letter is you're talking to us about this before the letter went. So that's helpful because there was a few years ago that I remember expressing some frustration that some letters went. We just hadn't worked out the relationship where it's like there was some stuff in the letter. Then Delegate Krebs mentioned it too, where it's like, I really wouldn't have rather you not ask for that, but instead ask for this as a head. And this is all great. These are all great, I think, great projects to do. And just to have a conversation beforehand, because sometimes it's like, hey, don't ask for that in the letter, but let's see if we can do a grant. And like you mentioned, I think I've probably gotten better over the last 2 or 3 years at learning where there's pockets of money buried, within agency budgets too. But as far as asking for inclusion in the governor's miscellaneous capital projects, I think these are all.
This is it.
These 3 are all good ones to ask for. And, they probably won't give us something for all 3, but hopefully if we really push, we can get some money, maybe 1 or 2 of them get something, which would be helpful.
Yeah, and normally, there's pots of money for lots of things already budgeted. Hospitals, community colleges. And so if you ask for something for a community college or for independent colleges, they put X amount of dollars in a pot and then they figure it out. So if you ask for something like that, they'll say no because there's already a pot of money sitting there for it. Like the community college, I've been encouraging for years and years, we have not taken advantage of the community college funding. We're either the only or the second only community college in the state that does not have an athletic facility. And they would fund 50%, and we do not leverage that community college money. And they won't just give you the money, you have to break it into parts. And if we had done, sometimes that money sits on the table, it doesn't get used, because these other community colleges have been leveraging it every year. We did get a parking lot with it one year, and we did get some of the nursing program, but for years, we've gotten maybe some HVAC money, but when you see the number of dollars going through the community colleges, you have to break your project up and say, because right now that project is probably doubled in cost since we first started asking, and we need it. It's, you know, we lose a lot of students because we don't have the kind of, we're doing the athletic field, turf field this year, but because we don't have the facility, and we could have leveraged that for many, many years, and it would have been done, and they would have paid for half, and right now the inflation has caused the whole project to go up. So financially, we're in worse shape by not have planning that all along and piece it together, and it's never been in the capital budget. So keep that in mind, because that pot of money is sitting there. And they will apply for it through the community college budget, but they won't do it until the county has signed off on the project and says, yes, we want this, we're going to support it. And then they'll say, and then you get to have a conversation about it. And it might be done in phases, and it's true with lots of other, like I said, independent colleges. McDaniel gets a certain amount. Our hospital, we're in line to get projects through the hospital money. So they don't necessarily do it outside of those pots of money, but we need to make sure we try to tap into them. Like stormwater, I don't know, do they have a pot for stormwater management? Because if they do, they won't do this, because they'll say, hey, go and get, and I don't know about the stormwater management.
They will also do, and I think this is the key, I think that's right, I think some other counties do this well. I think St. Mary's is one of them as an example. It's those pots, or using your Hampstead example, that number was so big, it forced Mayor Nevin and the staff to like figure out what was there, and then because they were the first in line, they got the whole thing. Right?
That's federal money too, I think.
It did, but I think the state ate 27 million of it.
Yeah, it was a lot. It was a lot.
So I think sometimes what happens, and it's directly aligned with your community college fund and community college example, is are we making sure that even when you think in like increments of 100 grand, are we making sure that everything that has a allocated framework for the state to assist, are we actually doing it, or are we writing a check for 200 that we could have only wrote a check for 100 if we would have requested the other 100, and the 100 just out there to be requested, and you know certain counties are doing it and others are not. It's exactly the community. I know there's a lot of stuff out there. They tend to be small amounts. Put a bunch of small amounts together, and you've got not an immaterial amount of money.
Senator Reedy, do you think that there's a strategic advantage if you all agree on all of these projects to meeting with the administration, with me and maybe several of the commissioners in advance of sessions, so that, you know, like you're saying squeaky wheel, I used to always do this with other places that I worked, where we like sat down face to face so we could apply a little bit of positive pressure, but also answer any questions?
Yeah, I think probably you will, and we could work together to coordinate schedules. I think probably, you know, sitting down with whether it's, a lot of times, I don't know, the previous legislative director for Governor Moore, I know he would have done this. I think Jeremy would also. The legislative director usually wants to know what the delegation cares about. And under Hogan, it was, you know, Chris Schenck at one point, it was other people. You wanted to pull them in on it. It wasn't that they get to make the decision, but they are going to be like, hey, I know this is important and whatever. So yeah, I think if we want to talk about setting something like that up, and we can see how many of us, whether it's Delegate Tomlinson and I, and maybe Delegate Stocko, we'd see how many of us could attend. And you probably don't need all your commissioners, but maybe it's you and you know, certainly the president, maybe another member or something. So that could be good. And then following up on that, so I'd say the legislature probably trying to connect with maybe you reach out to your intergovernmental affairs contact, and then we also can bring in the legislative team from the governor and say that we'd like to have a meeting about what our priorities are. Now, I do have to warn you all, and this is a conversation we're going to have with other people who are requesting money. This coming year will be, you know, it's an election year, and also all of us in here voted against some things that the governor wanted to do on money, and I'm not apologizing for that. And we're not going to commit to voting for the governor we can't right now commit to voting for a budget, for example, because we don't know what they're going to do with that budget. last year's budget really was a vehicle for a tax increase. And we were still able to get capital funding, and usually we vote for the capital budget, but sometimes, even though this is capital, there can be political reasons why you're not gonna get as much of something because you're not willing to go along with us for X, Y, and Z. I'm not saying that would come up in the conversation, you have to understand that's an undercurrent that's there. And, yeah, so.
And I think the one other thing, this is really different from the Hogan administration because you have single-party leadership. The governor's budgets are not made in a vacuum just at the level, like, if you're, the same efforts that are being put to his office for his budget, an equal amount needs to be put towards Speaker, Chair Barnes, Senate President, Chair Gazon. And it can be in the governor's budget on a Wednesday and out on a Thursday if Senator Gazon didn't agree, and if it wasn't agreed because nobody asked him, and it wasn't that he didn't, then he disliked it, but he did no reason to care about keeping it.
And by the way, when we know, and this is why this communication is so important and good, when we have put in and supported stuff, and we know, we'll certainly lobby internally with those colleagues as well. But at the end of the day, and I'm not saying it comes down to this because it hasn't in the Senate, but if they're trying to weigh money that they want to give and Justin Reedy's not going to vote for a tax increase and somebody else is, sometimes that happens. So we want to temper expectations. And as you get later in the 4-year term, it gets a little bit more political. And I'm trying not to make it sound too Machiavellian or whatever. It's just life. It's just politics. So there are times where we're going to advocate for what we can get, but there are times where it's why it takes a whole team approach. You know, it really takes working as many different angles as you can. And it could be, the nice thing about your requests here is if you got $3 million and it's for the state's attorney building, it is, but it also kind of just frees $3 million up whether it's for the sheriff or the state's attorney. So it's kind of interchangeable. So if they give you $4 or $5 million for one thing, it kind of is like you're getting it to help both. So it relieves your burden, whatever we can get on the capital side, because these projects are coming out of your CIP already, as opposed to if it was like some more specific project that we're only going to do if we get the money.
But that's why it also makes sense to, when you're thinking about the requests, like I don't know that this exists today, but let's just like hypothetically imagine that you're flipping the bill for some economic development goal, or you're flipping the bill for something with behavioral health.
Yeah, that's another one, yeah.
Why would you flip that bill? That's the bill that's the one you want to request, and then you eat this bill, so that you can align your request equal to what they want to say they gave to.
Right.
Same concept is fine.
I don't know if the governor has come, I know it's probably going to do what all the other governors done the tours of the counties. Have they discussed that yet with you? I know he's done several. Because when the governor comes, if and when, I assume he would, because they all do it, is to make sure they see some of these places. Because I've found they get hundreds and hundreds of requests just like this, and they have to read them and prioritize them. When you see something, like if you see the law enforcement building and see that it's built in 1900, and when they saw like the boys, we brought Adrienne Jones out to see the Boys and Girls Club, and not only did she come, the governor came, and we had Adrienne Jones out twice, and every time it comes up, hey, we got our money for it because they saw it, they saw what we were doing with it. And not everybody's as successful at completing projects as we do. When we do something, we do it well. And sometimes you got to tell your story, and this governor hadn't seen the story yet.
Yeah, he's been here a couple of times.
Not for the tour.
He brought his cabinet here, and they did do a bit of a tour, yeah.
Yeah.
I was going to say, they
January
generally,
of 24.
it's generally organized with just them, and it's kind of odd. We kind of,
Not in the past. In the past, we always part of it.
They
don't.
haven't been under more.
So did you take them, when they came, did you show them these projects?
Well, they were coming out here and they dictated to you what they wanted to do.
Oh, they did.
To some extent, we gave them all.
I'm sorry. Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah. So we suggested a dozen places, and so the governor went to 2, and the lieutenant governor went to 2. So they met with the board, they had their cabinet meeting, they met with the city of Westminster, then, as I say, and one of them was the ARC, one of them was YSB, one was, help me remember, there are 2 others, and I can't remember them.
And we were invited.
Yes.
We were invited to come, and I did go to one of the stops. We were invited by the governor's staff then, but they didn't really interface with us about what we wanted to do. Which that's fine. It's more like if they interface again, we want to be sure we're all,
And even like GoCap, I mean, I don't know, if we had GoCap out under Hogan. It came to our opioid task force meeting, we told him what we were doing. We got extra money through through GoCap money, but I'm not sure if that comes under the law enforcement, but just that person with that hat on, knowing that, hey, there's a need, they're sitting at their cabinet meeting, and bringing them out for other things, other cabinet members is helpful as well, because they get to see what we're doing. And then you point out that here's our law enforcement building, hey, look, and this is why we're replacing it. And it just helps you get some support.
Yeah, we invite them out. We just had the Secretary of MDE out here. We had the
Transportation or something?
Comptroller was here.
Yeah.
So,
Was the
yeah.
stormwater manager, did you let them know about the stormwater
Commerce is
manager?
coming. So,
And,
Took them to Union Bridge for,
well, she lives here.
look at their
Good,
storm,
good.
and their water and sewer too.
you may also consider, well, no, that's fine. We can move on. I was just I was making a couple notes
Can we,
here, but yeah.
can we make sure we get I mean, like, I don't remember. A lot of these, it was like very last minute we found out, or we didn't find out about it at all.
I wanted to mention that, particularly with the governor's staff,
Very well.
we are told not to invite you, that they will take care of it. I think there's a possibility the governor's going to be up here this month, and they said, we'll take care of the state. It's like we're not supposed to talk to you. So
Yeah, it's
and
bizarre.
I don't think, we probably shouldn't invite you when they tell us not to, right? Like, Rothstein
I've never been real good
announcement.
at taking orders from
Oh, I know.
side, so.
It's kind of counterproductive to what we're talking about we want them to come.
Don't listen to
Oh,
We want them to come visit and see and learn about our projects,
play the
but
game.
then we're not there, and we're the people that are down in Annapolis advocating for these
I
projects.
understand.
But we're not even there to see when you guys are selling it.
Yep.
But my feelings can be heard if we get $4 million, right? So you
Yes,
can
yes,
follow the
yes, yes.
instructions.
But it's hard with them. It's like Secretary Addicks the other day. Obviously, you got invited,
Yes.
right?
Yeah.
And
I honestly don't
I'm
think
just
it's
saying,
been
about
intentional,
Jeffrey's name.
even though
It's hard for me
obviously I had a number of disagreements on
Wasn't there
policy
this
with the
year.
current governor.
Yes.
There's been times I've gotten great notice about a cabinet secretary's gonna be here or the governor's, and then other times where it's like, it was like last minute. And I don't know, and they've had some staff turnover, like in any administration, has staff turnover at that level. They've had a good bit at the secretary level, but, so, I mean, I'm trying to, and frankly, there may be times that it doesn't make sense for us, so it just depends. But I do think generally it has been handled where the governor's staff invites the state legislators in any particular jurisdiction. However, if it's something dealing with stuff we're gonna be asking the state for, you probably should send up a flare
That's what I
in the
mean.
future.
Yeah, and I don't know politically, I'm always politically correct. Like, we got, Commissioner Rothstein and I got a call. Are you coming to the Veterans Court? And said we weren't, but we can. Well, Governor Moore would like to meet with you 10 or 15 minutes in one of the hallways if you're there.
Well,
So
I guess we'll be there, yeah.
I thought that was great, but I'm not gonna tell 10 other people
No, I think
ambush,
fine.
you know what I'm saying? So it's a fine
that hallway.
line on, it's not I love seeing you guys, but I don't know when it's politically correct for me to invite you to something that somebody else asked me to, you know what I'm
I
saying?
think probably, our level of relationship as a delegation and you all is such that I think, feel free to reach out and say,
Oh,
hey,
yeah.
this is happening. They said not to say anything. We're not gonna
But you generally do.
frankly, I'm probably not high on their list at times to like spend time with the governor because we just are at odds about a number of things. Nothing personal, it just is. There could be a variety of things. I think governor staffs generally are somewhat protective of not having too many hangers on.
Most definitely.
Which I think is fair.
And
That's a
I
bipartisan
don't want them
statement.
to not say, oh, I'd like to meet Commissioner Kyler, but he's gonna tell Delegate Tomlinson, so I ain't
I
calling
don't
him.
feel like you need to, I think you could probably in confidence let one of us know.
I don't know
something's
what
happening.
Tomlinson does at 2 a.m. I don't know if I trust
Send you
him.
emails.
Gives me up that editorial.
You know, it depends on what it is. Like with you, the situation you just mentioned, it probably wasn't appropriate.
No, I don't think
A
so.
lot of times, I think they're overwhelmed with all, because they are moving every day, that schedule is changing.
Oh,
Because
my
we even
gosh,
had
yes.
trouble with the Governor Hogan's office of not getting late notification, we knew about something, and it was just a matter of them trying to keep up. So some of it is just,
Yes.
and they probably, it is their function, so they're officially the ones that should request it, but that doesn't mean you can't mention it.
Yeah.
International travel, Italy.
We understand. No, it's good. We just keep the communication
Oh,
going.
no, we need to talk, we need to communicate, but there's times where if they say, don't tell them, I'm like, I want to meet them, I want to talk to them, so
You should. Oh, no,
I'm not going to
absolutely.
make waves, you know?
Should we move on to?
Yes.
So improvements to temporary food permits. I requested that this be on our agenda for today. Justin, Chris, you and I have spoken about this in the past. It's seemingly a pretty small thing, but it does affect a fair number of our citizens. And, you know, we've all been through the countryside at some point. We've been to a farm that set up a barbecue stand. We've stopped, we've gotten something to eat. And to set up a stand like that, you have to have a temporary food permit. So it was brought to my attention that historically, a farmer who wanted to set up one of these barbecue stands for the weekend could file a single permit application for the length of the time that he wanted to be open, typically from April to October or November, and he would have to pay one fee for that application, and he would be good for every weekend consecutively through that period of time. But state law has changed such that now after, I think it's 2 or 3 of those weekends, non-consecutive days of operation, they now have to file an individual application per weekend that they want to be open, and they have to pay a separate fee per application per weekend that they want to be open. And so, as has been explained to me by some of the farmers who have approached me about this, you know, they set up these barbecue stands on the weekend for supplemental income to help with their kids' after-school athletics, family-related expenses, whatever the case might be. And what's happening is because they are having to file applications for every single weekend and pay for every single application, there are times when they're losing more money than they're actually making. And you might make, you know, $25, $50 on a weekend if you're successful. And so what I would love to be able to do is to alter things in such a way as to make things a lot less difficult on those farmers. Because to me, none of this makes sense, because it creates unnecessary work and expense for the farmer, and it creates supererogatory administrative burden for the health department, because they have to process and deal with all of these applications individually. And so in speaking with the health department in the past, they indicated to me that a change in state law would have to occur in order to you know, redefine or to rework something with that code. I'm going to throw things over to Pam. I'm so incredibly grateful to her because she's looked into the more technical aspects of this. And I know she had some thoughts that she wanted to share with you guys as well.
I think, like a lot of issues, it's just determining, I think it'd be a small change, but what that small change is and how to do it so that we're respectful of some of the larger entities that are in operation, that are paying fees, that are regularly doing business, at the same time trying to just cut down on the administrative burden and making sure the fees are streamlined. It's my understanding that the health department gets to dictate what the fee is on a county level, so that there is a range to that, and they have been going out of their way to try to make things work as best as possible and helping people to reduce some of the administrative burden. That being said, it's not official in how things are done. So I think we need to just be careful and mindful if we do approach something to make sure that whatever we do is going to be helpful and not step on toes and keep it in that temporary area. But I think it might be a matter of a definition change or something so that it's that isolated, non-consecutive issue that is sort of causing this disparity, because you can go for 30 days straight to an event and you don't have to keep issuing this, but because it's an event and it's not non-consecutive events, that's where this issue is coming up. So I wanted to see if this is something you're all hearing about at all from anyone as well, because I think it's a matter of figuring out what's the scope of this issue. Is this large enough to raise? And if we raise the issue, can we do it in a delicate way that kind of solves this problem without opening up Pandora's box?
And I just want to mention, I have a lot of experience with this, because we had a problem with the fire departments and our churches. Remember that, Justin? We had a 6-month work group on it about 8 or 9 years ago, because of this very same thing with whether it's a temporary permit or an ongoing permit, and it was regulatorily done, so it's not a law that needed to be changed, it was regulation, and we had all the people at the table, church bazaars, they were shutting them down because of certain things, and the fire departments, and there's supposed to be a permit that you can get for, like, if you do it, once a month for 12 months. And the fees, I believe, are set by the county.
Yes.
So if it's a matter of we're keep paying fees, maybe the county has, I say the health department, without I don't know who approves the fee changes that they do, but if the health department has decided to collect more fees and make them do it all the time, that's something that we control. So this has been an issue in our county for a long time, and we literally, it was tedious work, and we solved it, unless something in state law changed, which I don't know that it would, because nobody would want to open this box up again. It was such a mess. I think we should talk to our own county and see what flexibility they have in interpretation.
Can
That
I
will-
ask,
I'm-
what's your desire? Is the bigger problem the amount of money of the fee, which,
You got to keep applying.
It's, right, it's the consistent applications, and I did speak to the health department about this, and they told me that I would have to go through the state in order to bring about some relief for the farmers. Otherwise, I would have tried to have tackled it. I did try to tackle it.
because of the amount of times they have to apply? So the question might be, is it in state law or some sort of regulation that is it because are these irregular times, or they're?
It would be basically every weekend through the course of a specific season. The farmers that were
Maybe we need to add
talking
farm
to.
stands, because we had fire departments in there, we had churches in there, and nonprofits. Maybe it doesn't say farm stand.
Sometimes it's that
We need to
simple.
read the law,
Right.
because maybe that just needs to be added as a category.
And you're right, some of it is, I haven't yet determined which part of it is state versus local, because some of it is definitely not requiring changes in state law, but then after we spoke, we were both unclear after we kind of put our notes together and the conversations we had, whether it will require a change. Like you said, if my thought was like exactly where you're going, it might just be adding a small part to the definition.
Share it with me,
Because from
because I did a
talking-
lot of work on that.
Because from
with the fire
talking to the
departments.
health department, there are a couple of different categories, but a lot of these people don't fit in any of them. So they are trying to be flexible, but they also have to protect people's health with food being served.
And it's a health department permit.
Right, and when I did bring this up with the health department during health board, and they very clearly indicated that any change would have to come through the state.
As far as the amount of times you have to apply.
Well, they were not clear about the whole thing, they told me.
Just ask them, we'll get them to show us where it says it, so we can see the words that maybe we need to add farm stands. Because we did it for the fire departments, they could get one permit, one kitchen license, and they could do it over and over again, once a month, twice a month, and they paid one fee, and that was
Remember
it. So,
that. Yeah.
you remember it, because it was it was very painful.
If I may, Commissioner, is this a local bill or a statewide bill? And the second thing is, has the Farm Bureau locally weighed in on us? Where are they at? Could they help us with this?
Well, so first of all, I've not approached the Farm Bureau about it. These are individual farmers who are coming to me for assistance, primarily in District 1, because you know how rural District 1 is. So I would imagine that the change would have to come from the state level if the health department is telling us that this change has to come by the state.
So it would have to be a statewide bill, not just like a local, okay, gotcha.
Well, if it was easier for the delegation to make this a local thing, right, to make some kind of local exception, I have no issue with that. But if
We would
it's-
if we could. I have a feeling that if it's an issue with state law, it's gonna be an issue that they won't let you carve out a county.
All right.
But we ought to explore everything we've just talked about
We want
and
to
be
show
sure where we
what they're
are.
looking at, and then we know what part of
Yeah.
code, and whether we need to add the word farm stands.
Yeah.
or just, we need to
I'll
know, where
find
do
the
they?
part of the code and we'll talk about it.
I've been trying to we've been trying to, it's been a nightmare on some of these things it takes a lot of work to get it, and then I'm fighting a battle right now in cottage foods too, so it's a whole, that's another one that the Krebs worked on, but we've been trying to do better with it, and it's just really difficult.
That's the word
so.
temporary, it's a temporary.
I think you'll find us all very open-minded to doing whatever we can to make it easier on people.
Right.
We just gotta figure out what the right vehicle is.
Oh, for sure.
It's not as crystal clear as it sounds.
I know, you-
Exactly.
I know you're saying farmers and you're saying farm stands, and you're talking about barbecue.
Specific, yeah, like if you're cooking chicken to sell on the weekend or something.
Okay, but this would be, I mean, I'm just thinking like my Lions Club, they occasionally as a fundraiser on the side of 30 will do barbecue, we'll do barbecue, but but we're talking about, you're talking about specifically about farmers.
Correct, but if you're interested in expanding, I certainly have no objection to that.
Okay,
You'd be
but-
surprised what you need permits for and sometimes don't know.
Yeah.
You can get a temporary permit for one time or for multiple times, but
I just wanted to make sure that you weren't, okay. I knew you said farmers were coming to you, but I didn't know if you were particularly wanted this to just be focused on farmers.
I'm not
Okay.
sure temporary food permits are segregated by farmers versus the Lions Club versus a church. I'm not sure they're,
There are some different categories, and so that's where I got held up in doing some of the research quickly, was that there are different types of permits, there's different categories for different groups, and there are also, as we're talking here, there's the consecutive versus the non-consecutive, and then the
Right.
long-term. So you just need to be really mindful, because you don't want to do something that takes it away from being temporary, because that temporary word is so key, because that's where you're going to
Yep.
get restaurant association and bigger groups
yeah.
coming in and
I
getting in the
agree.
way.
Yep.
And when we fixed it years ago, I thought the Restaurant Association was at the table, because they agreed with us that it was not conflicting with them. And it really had to do with, back then, churches and, anytime you invite the public in to something that's temporary, it's considered you need a permit for it. If it's just your club and it's closed and you only advertise it to the private, it's not closed. But if you put it on your billboard, it's public. Now, so it was like, it was a very tedious work, but I think it might be something simple if we could look at what they're referring to and maybe what needs to be added maybe through regulation.
Yeah, I think it might be. I'll check.
Do we want to move on?
So, yeah, the next one.
Thank you.
So,
I'll work it.
so the next one is we've submitted now 2 years in a row, so third time's the charm.
You talking about marriage?
Yeah, right. I'm still trying to get it right. No, resubmit the permit, personal property issue. As I
Yeah.
think you all know, as it stands now, there's no real
We're just starting.
carrot and stick issue. So if someone is responsible for paying personal property tax, if an organization, it's all businesses, are responsible for paying a personal property tax, we have very little leverage. Selling their personal property doesn't really give you much leverage. I know that's been mentioned by your colleagues down in Annapolis, not by you, as a possibility. But whereas if we had the ability to not issue a permit if someone was in default, if an organization, we're talking companies, businesses, are in default of not paying a properly levied tax, the personal property tax, then that would give us a little bit more leverage to get these things paid, so.
And is there a negative about that? Is there something we should modify a little bit, or is somebody against it? It's like
It seems like,
talk about hunting, but, it's you say the word hunt and
Yeah, it's a
people
whole
down
different
there get
story,
stirred
yeah.
up. Is something about this that?
Where did it
Del-
die last year?
so it didn't move out of committee
Okay.
in either the House or the Senate.
It
It was,
died in committee.
it was over in B&T, yeah. April introduced that bill on behalf of the delegation. I remember going back and watching it. There wasn't any controversy about it. I remember talking to the committee chairman. I vividly remember having a conversation with him because it was about this and the hunting bill. They both were in his committee, and he was like, yeah. He laughed at the hunting bill, and I was like, no, I'm not talking about the hunting bill. I'm talking about this one. This is the non-controversial one. And he didn't seem to have a problem with it. I think it was just one of those things where it just,
Got lost?
it got caught up. I don't know about your side.
I think that, I feel like something happened. For some reason, number one, it's in B&T, and B&T was like ground zero last year because of the budget. So they were holding lots and lots of stuff until later. And we had the hearing, There was a letter in the file, I don't know if you remember the letter of opposition from a group.
Yes. I think we addressed it, though,
Well,
didn't we?
we tried.
We tried
I
tried
mean-
to, right.
I mean, I think there was was it some kind of, was it the road contractors or some
They
group?
thought there was some type, I have to look back on it, but they thought there was some type of requirement that really didn't exist and that it was going to take much longer. And we were able to come back and say, this isn't going to to hold you up or take longer.
Right, but
I think.
what happens in that situation is that the committee gets in their mind, there's a problem here,
And they just.
and we don't have a lot of time.
Yeah.
We did go back.
Yeah.
I mean, I talked to them. But I'll be honest, I go back one time on a local bill, and then we were kind of snowed under. If the opposition happens in early February, you got time to keep going back, but it was probably something where, so we have to just stay on top of it, I
Yeah.
think, this year. We should go back, if you can,
I'll
go
find
back
it.
and look and see what the exact, I remember there was some weird thing.
And this
I
is
think somebody
personal.
thought it was gonna hold up permits.
It was, they thought that they
Yeah.
were not gonna be able to get a.
And they
permit.
thought it was property tax, not personal.
I think so.
I think.
That's right, it was so.
Real property.
And we've
tax.
already amended this bill once because there was actually Josh brought it up, Doug Saka brought it up, which was a good point, and we agreed that if you're appealing some conflict with the county on this, then you shouldn't lose your permits, which we've addressed that in the bill. So I think maybe we can get it done this year if we can just
Yeah.
kind of assuage that concern.
And maybe
Know
get
it in
it
advance.
introduced really early and pushed through early, because I think. a
But we
lot of-
dropped it early, we dropped it all, we had it dropped, I mean, it wasn't that
Yeah.
it wasn't early, but it was,
But if you know the opposition in
now we know
advance,
there's a little thing.
Because
It
they
feels like-
definitely got held up at the end when all of
Yeah.
the bills got held up.
Yeah.
This goes in front of
Limited stuff.
Corman's committee?
I'm
I
not
can work with
familiar.
that.
Can you,
I can make something happen,
Berta?
You want me to put you down for introducing?
if you
You're
I
want.
don't
you're like
understand.
anything over that
Is it
hunting bill.
because they haven't filed, or because they haven't paid it?
Last year was a strange year. You guys know that
It,
better
w-
than
it
us.
was. I was talking with a couple of the Democrats, and we were talking about how many bills we had passed, and I was like, "What a good year for me." And they said, and these were some of the guys who had been around a while, and they said, this past session was the session where they passed the least amount of bills. So I was like, oh, okay, well, I don't feel so bad now about myself.
That's a good thing.
If even you guys had trouble passing bills, because
Yeah.
it's, with all the budget stuff, it just sucked up all the oxygen in the room.
Between the budget and energy, so in the committees that had energy, everything else got held, everything else was much harder to get through, and the committees that had, the budget, it was a bit of a slog. So I think, we'll just roll it back this year and see if we can figure it out.
Question, personal property tax is a statewide way of doing things, and then the counties assess the tax. And there's only a few counties, there's not that many counties that assess personal property tax. A lot of them don't do it anymore. So would this be a state precedent that would go on the state tax part of it versus,
This is just letting Carroll County.
I don't know if they're going to, well, as I said,
other counties already do this.
okay, so if we're adding
There's
ourselves.
precedence.
Yeah.
Well,
other
if we're
counties
adding
already
ourselves
do
to a list of something that's already done, that should be a simple thing. We're not setting new.
this. That's my understanding.
I didn't remember that, I'm not telling saying you're wrong, that would be a
Okay.
good thing for me to be sure we know. We'll-
Because if it's setting new precedent for holding permits, it would be the ability to opt into doing that same thing. But if it's breaking new ground on a statewide personal property tax policy, it would be different. But if it's adding ourselves, it should not be. It should be very simple.
So I don't remember it being one of, like, we're just putting our name in a list, but I don't think it's without precedent, so I'm not sure, I'm
I
with the
think,
look.
right. I
My
think
point
there's-
is, it might not need to be a county bill
Yeah, I think
only, it might be an enabling bill for any county for enforcement, because they usually don't do county-by-county tax enforcement allowance. It's usually done a certain way. So I would just check and see if it should, first of all, if it's already allowed in place and we could add ourselves, or would this be a statewide ability to enforce for all counties that have personal property tax? And then some of those things, like Josh mentioned, you don't want to withhold a permit if they're appealing something. One thing I just found out lately that I just want to mention, many places have gotten rid of personal property tax because it helps bring business into your county. Pennsylvania doesn't have personal property tax, and I know one of our major employers here in the county that has lots of equipment, parks their equipment in Pennsylvania, so they don't pay tax here. So it's just something to think about, because I don't know how much we bring in from it, but it's one of those things, some companies with lots of equipment, it's a big deal for them. So it might be a statewide thing. We set the rate, but everything else, I believe, is in the state part of the code, but I'm not positive.
So,
Next one?
normal county bond authorization bill that Ted, I don't know if you want to say anything about it. It's nothing you haven't seen before. I don't know where, we know.
How do the rating agencies, no, I'm joking, no. I was gonna ask about the rating agencies analyze, no. Okay, don't
Delegate Stanko did a fantastic job of introducing that one last year. It was a 5-second bill hearing.
That's my easiest bill hearing of the year. It takes longer for me to literally get
Yeah.
into my chair to present the bill, so.
So nothing you haven't seen before. And then, I think Commissioner Gordon,
Yes.
this is the last one.
So this is a MALF-related issue for AgPres. So obviously, not all AgPres, you have county easements, you have, Maryland Agricultural Land Preservation Foundation, which is MALF. It's an interesting little dynamic that I think we're going to see more coming up on. I've had a couple farmers reach out to me. So if you had a grantor who put the property under easement, so let's say Mr. Smith, just for generic sense. So if Mr. Smith puts his property under easement, let's say he has one lot and wants to leave to his child. Well, if his wife's going to inherit the farm, it's extinguished when it comes to the son or daughter. They don't get the lot, the way it's currently written, which seems a little counterintuitive.
Wait a minute, I'm sorry.
Yeah,
It's complicated.
Mr. Smith is married to Mrs. Smith.
Correct.
And they have Junior.
yes.
Mr. Smith is, when he dies, wants to leave it to Junior?
The wife would, Mrs. Smith would receive the property, but Junior would have a child lot that would be available while in place. The minute he passes.
Can't do that.
Correct, because the property changes hands from the guarantor to the spouse, even though it's a family property.
But can they, I know we talked about this, I'm just trying to
Yeah,
remember.
no.
Can they, and I told you, several years ago, we had a very interesting little change we did into MALF to help, on another specific issue, but it was like pulling teeth to get it changed. Mr. Smith, Mrs. Smith, Jr., they can do the child lot, can they do the child lot before Mr. Smith dies, but this is after he dies, they can't?
Correct, after they cannot,
Because Mr. Smith is the holder.
is the holder. And since the wife is not also the holder, she would lose
When
the
she
child.
inherits, this is
Yeah,
what I
doesn't
meant,
she become-
when she inherits it, doesn't she, why can't she,
It extinguishes under the process.
Does
the
it,
child lot part of it
Correct.
extinguishes, not the mouth?
because she inherits it, or they want to add another name to it?
No, just because she inherits it.
Because
If
she
some other,
inherits
if some
it.
other,
That's-
and it's the spouse, which to me is so
Sure, yeah.
counterintuitive to a family maintaining property.
So what would the change be?
Well, I think there's a couple questions that come out of this. The initial question that came up from the parties that had reached out was, would there be a way to modify and maybe create it to be retroactively for anybody that already has an easement in place, but then modify that moving forward, that they would allow that lot, or it could be multiple child lots, because depending on the size of your acreage, you could have 2, you could have 5, you could have whatever. Would there be a way that we could see that that would still be allowable for those children, because typically they're looking to stay in the agricultural industry? But then that opens another question, which wasn't the intention when this was brought to me, but it's a good question. That's based off somebody's spouse obtaining the property. But more interestingly, that's the biological child of that marriage. Well, we all know marriage has a lot of different forms to it now. So if you had adopted a child, what happens there? Because the adopted child then wouldn't be able to receive a child lot.
Seems
the
to me
original
like if you were
property was in
legally
both
a
names.
child, it wouldn't matter. It'd be more like a stepdaughter issue.
Well,
or
that could be
stepson
too, I
issue.
would assume, but.
See, most properties, I would think, when you get the easements, have both names. If you're married, usually both of you are on the property, so it wouldn't be an issue. It's if only the one person was on the property and the wife wasn't on
But
the
that-
property.
but
No,
that-
but it can
yeah.
happen, yes.
But then you've also had, in the one situation specifically that I was made aware of, it was the owner, it was, well, the husband's name, but it was also his mother previously. So when the mother passed, they were joint holders. He obtained ownership. His wife's not on as the guarantor.
that makes
So
sense,
then
yeah.
that creates part of that as well.
And you can't add her on later.
Correct.
Right? You
Correct.
can't go back, like
No.
if I had a, let's not make it I or me, but if someone is married, maybe spouse dies, and he says, I'm gonna put my land in conservation, and then I remarry 4 years later, and he can't put his new wife on the,
Correct. Under MALF, they couldn't do that and then have the child lot.
so the change would be, we gotta figure out the change,
Correct.
and then see if Mouth won't come and like try to blow it up, but
Yeah.
they're very persnickety, our good friends. Our good friends at Mouth are very,
It's a fair
they're
very
very particular. Persnickety is not the right
No,
word. That's a-
particular, but
that's
they
a
are
pejorative
particular. No, they are particular.
keyword. they're particular.
But it is something that would affect the entire state. It's not just Carroll County,
Yeah, it's
obviously,
not
with
Campbell,
the
yeah.
easements, so, yeah.
And it also is the biological child of the original person.
Which is what makes
You have to
it-
be careful, because,
yes.
I mean, if it wasn't, but in this situation, it is still the biological child of the person that passed and the person that you want it to pass to. So it makes sense.
And this is, I'm sorry, the child lot has been established in the past?
It's established, what you mean with that one specific example? It's in the guarantor's easement, but the minute that individual passes, the child can't do it because the wife then receives the
So
property.
the problem is not only, oh, we might want to do a child lot,
Correct.
and now the husband died.
Correct.
It's, we did a child lot, but now it's,
No. If you've already done the child lot.
No, well, it's in
Then-
the, it's, yeah.
Then it does not get extinguished. The child lot survives. I mean, nobody comes.
It's sort of on
doesn't come
hold.
Take that property away from, yeah. It's only if there's a death prior to the lot being established, prior to it being.
so you're losing the right
Yes.
to establish.
To establish the lot, yes.
Correct. At the
Okay,
time,
okay.
the property's inherited by anyone
Yes.
other than one of those.
So I guess what we're trying to say is,
people on the original easement.
I guess the idea would be a bill that allows for the right to continue, the right to establish one to continue if inherited by a spouse. We could try to say inherited by a member of the family, that might be,
Might be
that's
a
gonna
stretch.
probably be a bridge too far.
Yes, probably.
Okay. Okay, no, I mean, I don't know, I'm sorry, I'm not trying to hog, I did a mouth-related bill like several years ago, and quite frankly, I think if the Senate president at the time had not kind of understood the issue, we would not have been able to get it passed. So, because he had some background in it too, or whatever, at the Senate president at that time. Because otherwise, I don't know, we would have, because it was, and all it was trying to let him switch where, like, the lines within the current thing that was preserved. Like, it was, they weren't taking any more land, and they still were not gonna let us, didn't wanna let us do it. So anyway, I'm happy to work on it. Yeah.
Okay. Appreciate it.
Seems like a good job for, Angelica Thomas is gonna take it on too.
Yeah, makes sense.
Do we have language for that? I mean, do you guys, they used to give us, I used to get a little notebook, and we'd have the language that you wanted. Can somebody in county staff get?
We will do that.
Yeah.
Do you know what?
This is early. The board hasn't actually
Okay,
addressed it.
because I mean, that would help you, that they would give you the language that they've vetted and.
We should engage, and since he's not here, I'll volunteer him, Senator West, who's away. Senator West actually is in the right committee for this, I think, and he has an attorney background, and this would, I'm sure, impact people in his part of the Carroll County and his district in northern Baltimore County. Well, let's work with him too.
Okay.
He might be perfect to carry that bill. And I can hear him explaining this much better than I just tried to, so.
We'll have language for any or all of these for you on your, what I think is now going to be November 19th.
Yeah, that's what we're looking at,
Delegation meeting.
yeah. We've sent that all to you
What
as a
is-
potential
Do you know what the introduction date is for pre-filed legislation yet?
It's,
Yeah,
what is it? I just saw the date. I thought it was early November. I think it's already November.
That's why we have our chiefs of staff, they know everything.
I can look it up. I just figured
I
someone
just
might
got an
know it
email about
offhand.
I can't remember, I just got an email about it.
I'm just wondering if it's before or after the meeting. That's all.
It's, the deadline to request the bill to be drafted is November 1st.
That's November.
So is
And
it,
November 20th is the last day to actually,
is it premature if we have things drafted to ask them to draft it and then after the meeting, if
Yeah.
it's approved? Because this way, that gives an edge.
We do that every year. We've
Okay.
generally done that. We'll go ahead and Meg Butler in my office,
Mm-hmm.
and she'll work with Tony, but we usually go get, before the meeting, we get the bill, we send the bill to drafting with the understanding, obviously, that we have to vote to approve to actually, well, you don't actually have to approve it to introduce a bill. It's just not gonna move forward if we don't
Sure.
support it. So, yeah, we try to get ahead of the game when we can, so if we can get some of this language, we can start.
Yeah. So if we can get that going, we can get that
Yep.
in the process, and then November 20th would give us time after the 19th
Yep.
to
Yep.
get things going. Great, thanks.
Because we won't vote on the 19th, we're gonna have the public hearing, so we generally don't vote them until early January, probably.
Oh,
But we
okay.
can introduce them, we introduce the draft, and then.
Oh,
go from
sure.
there. Yeah,
It's always good to have the language in front of you
Yeah.
that you're going to vote on.
Right, just may not move if you don't vote on it in January, but at least it's
Right.
dropped, like, it's drafted. Okay.
The real challenge lately in the General Assembly, which is different from when I first got there, was getting the drafts back. Once you get into session,
In a
it used to be no big
reasonable-
deal to be a week into
Yeah.
session and request a bill and get it a couple weeks later. Now, you really do want to get stuff requested early,
Yeah.
if you can. Even if you don't drop it until a little later, the dropping is what actually introduces it, but if you have the draft, then you're ahead of the game.
Just moves things forward.
Seems like it takes a long time these days.
It
A
does.
lot of new people. a lot-
Yeah,
a
they've
lot-
had
a lot
to,
of
they've
bills.
broken some new people, and there's a lot of people putting in a lot of bills, which is another issue,
Yeah.
not for this meeting.
The next things were things I thought the board wanted to discuss in general with the delegation, is that right? The next section C. We're on to section C,
Blueprint.
blueprint.
Take it away.
Did you want
Did you wanna discuss-
talk about Blueprint?
Oh, I thought
Like a well-oiled
I
machine.
thought by delegation considerations, they wanted to talk about, just Blueprint.
It's going well. You love it.
What's that? No, just
Great job on the waiver. And you do need to tame down your father, but that's another story.
Different day.
But we've got it for a couple years, hopefully. And do you see, is the delegation, is the delegates, is the House, are they ready to talk about it? Do you think Rachel Heiss will use this to try to modify stuff, or?
Like, I think a couple things, right? So from a state level, the state will be, if they're gonna open the bill back up, they're gonna open it up after the next election. So they're not gonna touch that,
So nothing this year, but hopefully next year.
And I think Carroll County's in a unique spot, not just in its waiver, but I think it's a couple things that everyone from a election season, like there's a framework you all want to keep in mind and just think through. So, I kind of think about as there's like the traditional term of the big 8 counties, right? Then there's your small counties like Kent County and Garrett County that have some of these unique carve-outs that they can do, right? Go to Garrett County, there's two high schools, North Garrett and South Garrett, or whatever the titles are, right? But it's literally 2 high schools. And so they have unique, neat frameworks there. I think Carroll County is in a place where there truly is, this is coming from like state folks that I've talked to, there's been a true understanding of where the county is and what the county is trying to accomplish with regards to the work with the APA. And the APA is going to, I believe, the APA is going to have a list of recommendations for Rachel Heiss and AIB. They will screen those recommendations. Those recommendations will ultimately turn into a negotiation with the legislature around changes in 27. Carroll County is unique to be kind of the representative body of mid-sized counties for the adjustments that were not top of mind for the original writing. I think Rachel Heiss has been very cooperative, for lack of a better term, with the people we would want her to be cooperative with in this process since the approvals come through. And honestly, in the process of getting the approval, she was a key person. And we have to, so this can kind of go one of 2 ways, right? So it can either go the route of, like, we're all politicians, right? We all have kind of different things we're thinking through and different roles that we sit in. But if it would be best for Carroll County for the APA and the blueprint to see Carroll County as the driving decision, the framework that gets used to build out what should have been a base school from the beginning, the cost of a base school, and then how that carries across different types of counties. So I'll give you an example that I think is most front and center for me because it's easy to conceptualize. Several of the large 8 counties were using, and we found this out late, like post-approval, we're using athletics and all costs associated with athletics and putting that into comp ed funding. So if you think about what
That's
that,
genius. No, I'm sorry. No, go That's not what they intended. It's right.
because you can move, because like it just hits the budget and it fits into the model and it works through. Carroll County and I think this was acknowledged, at least maybe not in a formal way, but behind the scenes, Carroll County, to Cindy, John, the board's credit, was following the letter of the law to the letter of the law. They were. And so they were not doing those types of things. And so you had counties like Carroll County, several counties like Carroll County taking that approach, some other counties finding every way to stretch the law, to use the other example we used, or the farm example, still within the framework. And I think there's been an acknowledgement that that needs to be better dictated in law, not at the regulatory body, and that's one of the changes I anticipate. Along with, I think there's going to be third grade pre-K, I think is going to come back up. I think there's a couple of items that I could probably bet on that will be top and center too.
Did you say third grade pre-K?
I say third grade all day, whatever.
All day, okay, I'm sorry.
Sorry, excuse me. So some of those are kind of things that haven't kicked in yet, but are in the benchmark to move forward. Maybe they stay, maybe they don't. I'm going to opine on that, but they're certainly in mind. And so they've been very cooperative. There's been a couple of areas kind of, there's acknowledgement of those things. And so it's going to, I think they're watching. I mean, plainly, I think there's a pretty clear statement to me that there's a consistent understanding of, they understand that no one, I don't believe anybody that sits here in an elected official seat would have voted for the blueprint. And those here didn't, and including the new commissioner, did not vote for the blueprint when in the seat, and that we don't believe in it in its like framework of public policy, but that there's the other alternative to that, which is that we can harp against the cost without harping against the goals of what blueprint's trying to achieve, and then that's our decision to make around how we want to do that, and then the impact.
Well, all that was standing after election. Is there an argument that the formula needs to change, but we're still going after the goals, but the formula is not a good thing?
I think the formula is likely to change for mid-sized counties. I don't know that it is going to change in a broad way that many other counties might prefer. That's my guess. And I think that Carroll County has the ability very clearly to be the driver of how that policy and those changes occurs, and that's up to us on whether or not that happens.
Good. And then lastly, and I asked this with AIB, and Rachel Heiss was on there, and the chairperson of their committee, their board was on there. Are we going to see politics going back and forth between MSDE and AIB that hurt us because they're fighting for control, or are they communicating pretty well?
I think that is, and I don't need to talk so much,
No,
but
go
I
ahead,
think
yeah.
that it's very clear that it is an expectation of the legislature and the governor that they figure out a way to get along well. And they will do as many memorandums of understanding until that occurs.
I think Dr. Wright, I think that was part of the,
Yeah.
I think they brought her in to kind of,
Previous superintendent problem.
there was a problem with which I think,
Yes.
I know you know. But, if I could just try to put an exclamation point on what Delegate Stanko just said, and he really has done a great job of knowing and breaking all of this down, and our delegation as a whole worked well together on this issue, but we really appreciate all his work, because the House side of it was the real sticky wicket. Over in the Senate, it generally has been, they're very rigid that they want it to go forward, but and I say this as a compliment to the Senate President Ferguson. Obviously, we don't agree on a number of specific policy issues, but he wants it to work to have it be effective and help the kids. He does. That's his motivation. I can argue with him a little about how we do it, but so if they were much more open to, and even the year before, we worked on some flexibility very quietly for another issue the school system had faced. And so that they were good. That was not a problem as much. Obviously, had to keep him in the loop and stay up with him. But I can tell you, I had one colleague in particular who's a big education policy person in the Senate who has been talking to our superintendent, and she actually reached out to me and said, why does he want to talk to me? And I said, well, actually, you should have this conversation. It's a good thing. And he said to me, he said, we did not, he said, I'm a big believer in Blueprint, but there was a lot we didn't envision about how these different formulas would impact different school systems that were trying to do the right thing. They just didn't look at it. And I can say, well, look, we tried to tell you all that, but instead I want to say, because there's stuff that we didn't even know when we were opposing it. We were opposing it more on overall cost and other issues, but just even the way that they siloed these pockets of money and other things like that. So anyway, I say all that to say they're actively, he acknowledged to me, they're going to have to change the way this all works. Now, how they do that exactly and
with a
why-
house, and with a
that's
house,
what
talk
we have
about
to-
that.
And Delegate Stanko is right. We have to engage in a unique way, and it's why we tried to, I know Chris, we were talking to, we tried during session to explain this to people without spelling it out, because we have to be careful, but we're going to not vote for things that we believe are wrong. We also, though, we're going to have to figure out how we talk through making sure they look at, I'd call it the Carroll model. They're not going to want to call it that, but
They might actually.
look at how we make something work and build flexibility based on that. That's a best case scenario, and it will probably require those of us that, if any of them have an election, so who knows who will be there, but if we're there, we're going to have to, engage in that conversation, and it may require that we even have to, at some point, vote for something that I'd rather just vote to end the whole program and start from scratch, but we're not going to have that in front of us.
Not
So
gonna
we'll just
get
have
it.
to see. But that's probably all going to be after the next election, because I think candidly, politically, they want to get through the next Democratic primaries, honestly, before they make major changes. But
Keep in mind, you say we support the priorities. I came across this blueprint again, and I read it several times, but I think if we go back and look at the just general priorities, we would not support half of them. And I'm not going to repeat what they are.
I mean it that way. I
Well,
guess
well,
what
but
I-
the little, there's little pieces of it that are very good, and we agree with that, and a lot of the stuff we've already done, some of the implementation, but you look at the 5 priorities on the very front, a lot of it is about equity versus equality, and what that means is, hey, we might be here and they might be here, they just want us to come together, and we want all. So when you really look at it, you got to be careful, because that is the driving force. There are parts of the blueprint that are good, but I get back to, sometimes one size fits all doesn't work, and we all get swept into that, counties that are already doing well. Once this comes back up again, we'll be into blueprint for what, 6-7 years? And you look at the results, we have results.
worse than they were before we started.
But the people, some of the people are worse. All this money's gone in with no results. So at some point, people are going to start saying, gosh, we've put how many billions of dollars in 7 years, and we're not seeing, incremental, you're getting from 12% to 20%. That's not exactly very good. So hopefully they'll be looking at that and saying, gosh, this investment has not necessarily paid off the way it's working. Let the counties that are doing well continue to do well and give them the ability to do well. And the counties that need help, let's put the focus and the money that we're giving to these folks and focus on them, and don't make everyone have to follow the same box when you're already doing well.
I think that's maybe when Josh talks about the Carroll model. I think that's some of what we're saying we hope as a best case is that they do look at more flexibility. And as I mentioned, I'm going to leave them unnamed, but the person I was speaking with, they're never going to say, whoa, these investments didn't pay off, because they always believe more money will solve problems. They're never going to say that out loud. But I have seen a little bit more of an acknowledgement in private conversations that the flexibility argument, because some of the bigger jurisdictions, they want, honestly, their legislators were upset that they had these massive central offices and bureaucracies.
Right.
So they're like, yeah, we're going to make you get those people in the classroom. And we would be like, yeah, we agree. But we didn't have that.
Let me give you a real
Yeah.
world example of what actually happened that I mean as an example, because I agree with your point of view on that, the goals, so to speak. I think as an example, and I'm going to use Anne Arundel County because this was a real conversation I had early on that was like we had to work through, is if you go to Anne Arundel County, Severna Park, Broadneck, Glen Burnie, and you walk into Severna Park versus you walk into Glen Burnie, it's like very different places. It is not, it's very different. And so the context of like when we started talking about classroom student-teacher ratios, and actually this was said on one of the board meetings where they kind of pushed back against Cindy, and they're like, well, we keep getting emails about student-teacher ratios, and our model is very clear, your student-teacher ratio is 26-1, and even then it laid in, it was like they were not, Rachel did, but like the broader board was still trying to understand whatever, that, well, that meant Liberty was 37-1 or 35-1, and Key was 14-1, and your average is 26-1, right? And so in that same model, it's basically Severna Park, Glen Burnie, whatever. Well, Severna Park to Glen Burnie is 15 minutes. Key to Liberty is 40 minutes, right, or 35 minutes. And so when I talk about it from the perspective of like the goals and how like you compare the large eight, one of the large eights with a mid-sized county, they would frame it as, well, we were never, which I think that's fair, is like we were never trying to get a 35-to-1 classroom or 38-to-1. It might have not been our top priority to think about student-teacher ratios, but that was literally never the goal. We heard the AIB say that, but including my chairman who represents some of those areas, like they were thinking about, well, we don't, in their case, we want the Board of Ed to be thinking about like, well, should this districting look? He literally, the first response he said to me was redistrict.
Yeah.
And I said, and my first response was not, oh, we just did that, this will be terrible, was, what do you mean? I don't, like, for me, it didn't conceptualize. And then I was like, you want us to like have kids drive around Kemar for 45 minutes on a bus that are poor, drive them to Liberty 45 more minutes, and then take wealthy kids from Eldersburg and drive them an hour north, do the same thing an hour north? Like, that's the opposite of what you're, like, all the goals of Blueprint. Yeah. And it was like, and he was like, and then we literally sat down and was like, explain the geography. And we got lucky because the person that, one of the people that's a key component on the staff is from South Carroll. Mm-hmm. So like he looked at her and she was like, yeah, that's exactly right. Like what he's saying doesn't work, right? And so my point on it is that like they would say our goal was not to do what happened at Liberty High School, and they're looking for us to not make it as though that like, oh, that was your goal. And like it was your goal to have 35-to-1 classes.
Yeah.
And it's like, no, that wasn't their goal.
We're trying to give, even though
Grace.
we don't agree, we're trying to give some grace to say, yeah, we agree, we know that wasn't your goal, so help us fix it, right? Like you know, and so that's the conversations we have to have.
It wasn't them trying to like stick it to Liberty or stick it to Century. It was their model that works in Glen Burnie for how they view the world does not work in any context in Carroll County.
Which we probably tried to explain when we were debating, but we didn't have those specific examples. When we were debating in 2020, 2021, we were trying to say, guys, one size fits all doesn't work, but we didn't have like that. Now we have actually, unfortunately, we have a great example to say, this is why we need this flexibility.
There are countless
But what-
examples that are coming up across jurisdictions of all size counties that say exactly that. Like in all the meetings with MACO and different jurisdictions, over and over and over again, I've heard various people say the same thing on different topics. And the other thing that keeps coming up that I think is one of the most compelling issues, regardless of who's talking about it, is how the formula truly is like old and using old numbers and old figures based on inflation and where, you know, what dollars mean now. So I think there's a lot of room, to, like you said, to find that kind of way that Carroll County's been approaching things. And there was a lot, you know, at the Summer MACO conference, there was a lot of praise around how Carroll County's handled, you know, recent issues. So I think going off of that and using the next year to try to move some things in the direction that would be beneficial everywhere, but certainly here, there's definitely an appetite, because I've not heard from more than a few speakers on panels that people are happy overall. And so that is going to allow for change. But like you said, it's not going to happen until after the election.
And just for everyone's context too, it's a bit of a moving target, because even locally, because you have like in the last 12 months, since the Blueprint approval and the new numbers came back at year end, there's been an increase in comp ed in Eldersburg, and there's been a decrease, I think, in the Manchester area. And so it's like the county has like some underlying shifting demographics. And so you have this kind of like, we got the waiver, probably it gets rewritten, and then the county itself is moving in some ways statistically underneath of it. And so far the moves have all been beneficial to what we would want with classroom sizes. That could also reverse, right? So it's tough to say. I think like as an example I remember if I'm getting this concept right, is like you have more comp ed kids entering kindergarten at Freedom Elementary School, and per capita relative to the graduating seniors at Liberty. And then if you go to a different part of the county, I think like the Manchester area, it would be in reverse. So the comp ed kids rolling off are higher percentage of comp ed than are coming in with kindergarten. So if you play that over 5 years and it rolls through the same way, you can have some just number benefit in that adjustment. And again, like
So buying time is helpful for
5
us
years
in that
later.
perspective, yeah.
What
we keep
worries
talking
me,
ab-
I think Carroll County is capable of fixing it if they're given flexibility. The fact that they're gonna look at the bad jurisdictions and try to fix them, we have one jurisdiction that's consistently failed, they throw money at it, and all they do is change how good you're doing. Well, it's not that 94% passed the test, it's what percentage improved last year? Well, if you only had 10% and you went to 20, you improved 100%. If you had 90, you can't improve that much. And I just don't think, I don't know how you fight that they're not realistic about what all Blueprint cares about is how much money you throw at it, not whether not whether or not you succeed. And I don't know how to fix that.
Well, one thing is they keep looking at all these formulas and the amount of time that our Board of Ed and our staff spent with these numbers. And for us, we were getting results. Just because you're low income does not mean you need double the money. And just because you are affluent doesn't mean you don't need more help. So just defining it like that, to me, I think it's, I don't even know what the word is, but it's sort of, it's not fair to do it that way. So again, the jurisdictions that are doing well, and we have room for improvement, we all know that. But to continue to tell us and tie our hands to all these formulas, let us get the results, and the ones that aren't getting the results, tie their hands. And that needs to be the message, because all this, I mean, last year, the amount of time that Board of Ed staff spent on this, and think they could be spending that time on how do we improve instruction for reading or something else, but it's all about how do we manipulate this formula. And sometimes we are, even in the county government, we are too honest. We follow the rules. Others don't, they push the rules. And I'm not saying it's right or wrong, but these rules are too stringent, and they don't, and at the end of the day, they weren't not good for our students. And that's, I think, even the superintendent at the meeting that I went to said that. This is not what we would choose for our students. This is, like, we're not even advocating for this. I mean, there's some good pieces to it, and that tells you something. When your own school district realizes that's not going to help you, all this money can get thrown at you at once, but the way you're making us spend it isn't necessarily going to help us. That needs to, especially for the ones that are doing well, that message, just give us the flexibility to have the achievement, and then leave us alone. And then if we're not accountable, then you tie our hands.
But
And,
how do you make them care about who's doing well? Right now, they don't care.
well, we do. We do.
Oh, I know we do. That's what I say, Carroll County does. And the other problem is, I said, if I were a teacher in Baltimore County, you sent me to a certain school, I'd quit. There's not a school in Carroll County that I'd quit, and like you said, Glen Burnie and Severna Park, Arundel, all the,
I think
they're
the key for us,
different.
the key for us is, as we talk to our colleagues, there's messaging about the overall issue, but as we talk to our colleagues, we take the attitude based on what they tell us and how we know about them, that they care about kids succeeding. We don't think their approach is right, but we know you care about kids succeeding, and we want to show you how we've made it work, and I think that's where we'll try to keep our focus.
And our colleagues, I understand this because I spent so much time on it, and I didn't understand it this time last year, and I use that example of the athletics example. Like, our colleagues don't understand broadly, there might be a couple of them, but they don't understand that this one county that I'm thinking of was doing they're taking, this is a massive county, but it's like, they definitely have a large athletics budget, and just wiping a magic wand and saying that applies to comp ed, that's millions of dollars to solve another problem, where it's like, well, they'd argue that is flexibility.
Yeah, right.
So it's like an APA, I think, probably, my read on it is the APA learned, and the board learned that happened, because the thing about, the APA can't go line item.
No.
Or they're not line item every budget item. It's like if it's brought to, or they are doing that now, I guess the board can. And so it's brought awareness, Carroll County has brought awareness to that's happening. So you I know they'd also say oh, you guys are being too, they strategically said, you guys are being too conservative on this. You're following this the way it's written.
Yeah, you're being told that you're following it too closely. We're like, well, wait a minute.
And so it's but then John and Cindy will point no, look at subsection 2.7 and it says that's what you're supposed to do. And it's yeah, but that means different things to different people. And so it's well, there was a learning in this, and this is kind of the model example. oh, we actually have to spell this out in a very streamlined way, and that's part of what I expect to be the rewrite. In the same way, and I think every group, including MSEA, has clear things they don't like about Blueprint. I'll just give you a teacher example. So if you are, maybe everybody here disagrees, but we as a state have decided that career connections within inside of a school is an important role that we want to have for placing internships and doing those models. Well, if you're a career connections teacher, I'll say it's not impossible, as it is possible. You could go back, you could change jobs within the school. You cannot get nationally board certified. So if you choose to go the route of being in that role at some point and you are not already nationally board certified, you also can't renew your national board certification. And that has a pretty significant impact to teacher compensation. Indifferent to whether you agree with it or not, it does have an impact, right? Yeah. And there are some similar things with special ed. So like our special needs groups, the teachers, if they have if they're non-classroom instructive, but they're like different parts of it, so different for, hey, we're working with the students with specific learning disabilities, but they're still kind of in this traditional framework of education versus the non-traditional cannot get nationally board certified. And so you have this push away from well, why would, if I'm a teacher, can I really justify not doing that? Athletic directors have the same issue, obviously they're back in the classroom, so different things. And then even at a principal level, we have a lot of assistant principals in this county, I can tell you that plainly because I've heard, that a lot of them are considering doing a flip because of compensation frameworks. And lots of different stuff that my point is if you go through that, well, that's its own bargaining group. MSDA is its own bargaining group. We hear the individual from the instructive aides bargaining group comes in, and that's not even a part of Blueprint.
No, they're not paid much at all,
Right,
and they're the ones that.
And I'm not advocating for any individual thing, but I can say that you asked about changes. There's no group, including the individuals that were the most involved writers of this, that don't go oh, we missed this, we missed this, we missed this, we missed this. And so it's gonna have to.
So I'm sorry, so on that note, that there may be potential changes not this coming year, but the following year, what can we do as a Board of Commissioners to help put you guys in a better position to be able to confront this thing down in Annapolis?
Make sure that you understand what Cindy and John are doing all the time with regards to their work with the APA, so that it streamlines through that the recommendation.
The AIB, you mean the AIB, when you say APA,
Oh,
you're talking
APA, so APA is the consultant group that the AIB forced the Board of Ed to hire as a liaison to the AIB. So sorry, should I explain?
I was gonna ask that stupid question.
No, it's
too.
not.
And they're a pretty good group.
Yes.
They're consultants. They were hired.
Yes. Yes, they are, and they mean well. I think they started very distrusting of Carroll County's.
Oh, my gosh, yes.
Yes. Sorry, and they have very much warmed up and were a very important part of getting the approval waiver. Specifically, I don't know them personally.
They were a character witness, basically, by
Yes.
the time we got to that point.
And they're still working with them.
And they will be throughout.
Yes, exactly.
So they will be the group that the space school model. And I know I've taken 30 minutes here, so excuse me.
It's only the biggest line item in the county's budget.
There's a recognition that they didn't, I understand it to be that there's a recognition that the base funding school model for Commissioner Krebs's comment about local control, that they did not get the base funding model right. If you do not get the base funding model right, what every school needs to operate as a minimum standard of funding, your entire formula doesn't work.
Building a house of cards on a non-firm
And
foundation.
I don't know that, I can't speak and say that whether they would agree or disagree with that with large and small schools, but there is a recognition, at least, I guess I put it on the record, of that being an issue for at least mid-sized counties.
And years ago, they used to have all these silos of money before Thornton, which was in 2002. And during Thornton, I was on MABE and that whole group, and they wanted to get rid of the silos, and they did. So they let you have discretion. And they basically went back all the way to giving you all these silos of money. And it's okay, which one is right? This way, there's got to be a happy medium somewhere to hold people accountable. But they went the totally opposite direction than they did 20 years before.
And they would say that the base school funding being correct then allows the local jurisdictions to make decisions. But if you get the base school funding formula wrong, you have to use funding that should be discretionary to backfill basic needs. And then you end up with 35-to-1 schools with no media specialists and et cetera, et cetera. So that's my update, so to speak. And again, like, we all have to kind of think through all of the next 12 months or so and how we partner with the groups and understand we're all in, well, I'm not, but you all are in re-election mode. And that has its own kind of things you got to balance as well. So just broader update.
Thanks a bunch.
Did a
I'm
great
glad I
job on it.
asked, and we need to get through solar. Is there any hope? Mike, you, Commissioner?
Yeah, I was, so that's a great question. Is there any hope? I just wanted to spend a couple minutes raising the delegation's awareness of these solar industrial projects on agricultural land. Now, we're going to talk about MPRP in a minute, and it's worth noting there's a fundamental difference between the two. Obviously, with MPRP, you've got, an egregious use of eminent domain by a non-government agency forcing themselves on people's property. Solar projects on agricultural land, despite the board's 5-0 vote prohibiting it, you've got owners who are initiating this work. But what is very similar to both of them is that they are completely based on a false set of narratives, dare I say lies. We know MPRP doesn't assist Carroll County residents with their bills. We know it doesn't benefit us, and neither does community solar. And that's what these are being called. I know you fought some battles in Annapolis last year regarding some of that legislation. The reason I'm bringing this up and the reason I wanted to raise it is there are no less than 13 of these projects working their way through right now. 13. If we think people are going to be upset about MPRP, wait until those shovels start going in the ground. So the five of us are talking right now of ways we can try to address this issue even better than we have been. Again, voting against it we thought was the solution. Apparently not. It's Maryland. But this is going to be a big issue, gentlemen. It's going to be a big issue when these start, and they are about to start. So I just wanted to raise your awareness on that. It's going to be ugly. People are going to be upset. And dare I say, I think that the reaction will be quite similar to the same magnitude we see with MPRP. And that's hard to believe because it's, there's a lot of people involved with trying to stop that MPRP. So just wanted to take a few minutes to raise your awareness on that because it's a big one.
The thing of one of the most interesting things too is the more and more we get community solar, the more people get hooked up to that, the more other people's electric bills go up.
Exactly.
Because they're paying for that.
Mm-hmm.
So it's this perverse thing where it doesn't bring down, you would think, oh, we're putting more energy onto the grid, so everybody's bills are going to go down. But no, the people who are subsidizing it are the ones who are not on it.
Correct.
Which is really nefarious, and we've certainly fought against it. You wanted to say something? I'm sorry, go ahead.
And before you do, over 20 years, the solar company is going to make $3 or $4 million. Over 20 years, the landowner is going to make $2.5, $3.5 million. The guys that get on it might save $50 a month, but no, they're saying 10%. So for some, it'll be $25 a month. It's insignificant. And
Not if we can pay for all the farmland, then it won't be insignificant.
well, and then this bill that went in that said 5% of ag, that would be 200 or some projects in Carroll County, not 13, and that's disgusting. So go ahead,
Absolutely.
Delegate Tomlinson, sorry.
Thank you, sir. I just wanted to go back to one of the points you were making, that the difference between the Maryland Piedmont Reliability Project and then in this situation where farmers are they're an active participant in this.
In
It's
some
a deal.
cases.
But I mean, and I know you know this, but I just want to just bring it up again that, I mean, I've heard from farmers that they are getting, multiple calls. I think one person I saw on Facebook, had his mail laid out. It was multiple offers. These people are ruthless. Yes, at the end of the day, it's the property owner's decision, but they are, being targeted by these guys, and they are aggressive and hungry. And so, and we tried to bring this up because that's what you hear from the other side on the floor is, nobody's taking anyone's land. These are people who are
Mentioned that in Carroll County, we have over 65 approved and contingent uses for in agricultural land. We're not really restrictive, but you're right. This train is rolling, and it's a locomotive, and it's going real fast, and it's just something we all need to be aware of. And
I think from a tactical, strategic standpoint, the bill that passed the 5%, which I certainly, we all voted against, technically, that put a cap on it, a ginormous cap. There was an effort in the Senate to try to make that 2.5, and that failed. I think where Mako, where you guys, if you can unite with other rural counties, could really push back on, we got to have a better cap than that. I'm against. I think there should be local control on all of it. Caroline County, for example, had this thing where they said, okay, we'll do a certain amount of solar even on ag land, but we're going to confine it to one sort of swath of the county, and we're going to pick that. And that was actually, I know Senator Hershey represents that area. He was trying to, again, we're not for any of it, but if you could find a way to get to where you go, if your county sets up something like Caroline County did, that's how you can at least limit it more. And that failed, but there was some interest in it. So I think from a tactical standpoint there, the challenge you have on the messaging side is they are saying, well, why should you all be able to ban private owners from having solar on their land if they want to? It's their land. And that's a hard argument from a philosophical standpoint. I think you have to go back to how controlling land use. I did want to ask you, I suppose that if you guys, are you guys able to, you're not really able to limit it on ag land at all anymore, correct? It's done, the project goes now to the PSC.
PSC.
And you guys can weigh in at the PSC, and they're supposed to coordinate with you, but it's sort of
The only
it's-
thing,
They're very nice, and then they say yes.
right.
Right.
the only thing is if it's very small, under 1 megawatt? Under 1 megawatt, 2
something
two
with similar to that,
megawatts? I can't remember, but yeah, if it's only if it's a very small project, do we get any control?
Yeah, we don't have all the answers right now, but it's going to be a tremendous
Yeah.
issue.
And I don't know any true farmer that's doing community solar.
That's correct. That's
They're
my
mostly
understanding.
developers
How
that
big is
buy-
how big is the community solar development?
15 to 20 acres apiece, roughly speaking.
Can you require that it not be? Can you make any requirements on it?
Well, we attempted to do that. Obviously, we tried to be preemptive
Yeah.
with the state regulations, and the state regulations are much less stringent than the ones we would have preferred. So once again, we're losing that battle.
Yeah, we tried setbacks, we
Yes.
tried visibility, we
And they
tried.
wouldn't let you do even setbacks and visibility
And like if
issues.
we
That's
do a
interesting.
setback at 200, the state makes it 50, or.
And forget any attempt at common sense. I mean, Commissioner Kyler in particular has talked a lot about masking of these facilities, these industrial projects, trees, berms.
And my
Not
concern,
something people understand.
My concern is that I don't think people know, because you talk about, going back to the private property rights thing, I don't think people understand when they hear about solar, they don't understand that that's there for 20 years, but then it doesn't keep going for 100 years. It has to be replaced, so there's a lot that is, and we're trying to get that message out in Annapolis, but it is so tough. And it's so interesting because one of the reason our electric bills are all going up is because we don't have enough in-state energy supply. That's the main reason. There's other factors, but that's the main reason.
Yep.
And that's the argument for MPRP, interestingly enough, which is not going to help with that problem, but they say it does. So you would have to, in order to replace one coal power plant or natural gas power plant, you would have to pave over, it was something like, there's thousands of acres of farmland with solar. It just doesn't work. It's fine for powering certain things. It's fine for being a piece of the grid, but they are so bought into it. And now with offshore wind going away, which is great news because that's a boondoggle, I'm worried they're going to double down onto solar even more. And so the only thing, every so often there's an issue that's a tidal wave issue in Annapolis. Kerwin was that way. We tried to oppose it. Now, then years later, they realized we got to make changes. But this is another one where it's just very hard, and we are making the arguments against it. But anything we can do to build coalitions with other counties, I think, is really the critical piece. Is trying to.
One One of the
put a stop
questions
to it.
I have for, I guess, the board, I was listening, I guess, last week's meeting, and there was talk, Chris Hein was recommending codifying the state law into county law, and I want to do some more research on that, but as you might remember, in Annapolis, often they'll put a bill in and they'll say it's codifying federal law. And we'll say, okay, why do we need it? Well, because they want to be able to regulate it at the state level. We don't regulate all federal law, we would just be rewriting it. But some of the things that they want to do, and they want to be able to control it more than the federal government does, we put it in our state law so we can say, no, you can't do this. Because the feds sometimes don't care. So my question is, I'm just knowing that we do that in the state, and we usually vote against it because it's usually stuff we don't want to do, but they want to be able to really control it, and the feds don't care about it. Should we be codifying state law that we don't want in our local law? And what benefit does that have? Why not let the state, I mean, obviously they got to follow state law. They come in, they have to go to the PSC. But why would we vote to codify something we don't agree with? And are other counties doing the same? And what's the benefit to us in the county of doing that? So it's food for thought because I started thinking about it and I wanted to try to reach out. In fact, I put in a call to Mako yesterday. Is Kevin still with Mako, Canali?
Yeah, Kevin. Yeah, Kevin.
Because he didn't call me back. But anyway, I just wanted to ask him, if he knew the benefits, because we don't codify everything we do in county law. So what's the benefit other than we're saying we don't agree with it? So let them go to the state law.
But even if we don't, they have to follow the state law.
I know they do, but then
So it's kind of paper thin. It's like, for
Do you
instance,
understand? But right now, then we're in charge of
yeah, can I
enforcing it.
finish my sentence?
I had the floor.
Okay.
Let me finish.
Take it when,
Okay, so let me just.
I can be here till 6, so talk away.
Thank you. So I'm asking you, if you keep your ears open, I want to try to get in touch with Mako to find out what is the benefit, and are other counties all codifying this stuff into law? Because, again, because of the state thing that we picked and choose different things that they wanted to do, if we don't want to do it, let them just follow the state law. And then instead of us being the enforcer, let them go to the Public Service Commission. And the other thing is, you keep talking about price between the solar, and you just told me something I didn't know, Justin, about the cost of the solar, and the quantifying that with rates and how much is going into the Renewable Energy Fund. We came out the other day that our electric bills, BGE territory, which is most of us, in September, it's going to have an average of $30, and it's going to go up a month, an average, and then next year, for something that's not even, this stuff hasn't even hit yet. So I think the more that we talk about cost, I mean, the people, as you know, in some parts of the state don't care about our ag land. They don't care about the transmission lines. They don't care about the view shed. They don't care about a lot of the things we care about. But they do care about what it's going to cost. And this is going to hit every electric ratepayer, which is everybody, by a lot. And when you start, we need to start talking about in terms of money, cost to the ratepayer in Baltimore City, in Anne Arundel County, in Prince George's County. And that's when their ears are going to perk up, because I don't think people think that this solar costs people money, but they're being subsidized by money off of our tax bills, off our electric bills. So if we can, that was a good number that you gave, and I think with MPRP, it's the same thing. When that hits, that billions of dollars is going to come right back into our rate base in a couple years from now.
Just a thought, and this may be a stretch too, but when you're talking about costs, is it too much of a stretch to talk about food costs as well? Because when I think about agriculture, local food's going to be healthier, cheaper, et cetera, and if ag land's being impacted, people are constantly talking about the cost of groceries and how it's going crazy. So I don't know if we can find any data on that or try to just draw people's thought process along those lines, but I think that could kind of bolster that argument as well and not just be about the BG&E bill.
We just got to keep talking about cost to all the people that we need their votes to change this, and you know who they are, the people that pushed it, and they're people, they need to explain how this is so important that we have to up your rates by $50, $100, and that's an average. I think an average is I remember years ago we looked at an average household. It was like I use twice as much energy in my house. Average counts all apartments and condos. So a lot of people, it's going to be way more than $30. It's going to be like $50 just in a normal house with 4 people in it. So that's going to start hitting this month, after the 15th, which is in a couple days, and we need to start saying this electric bill is because of these policies that were put in place by the legislature.
Now, back to my original comment I tried to make, we're already not following state law with our lot. We've already done that. Which thing did you push on Walmart and the buildings on being calling the cops too much.
Oh, we look at nuisance ordinance that the state overrode.
Yes.
Yeah.
Per the state, you can't do that to residential. Per our law, you can. Now, the sheriff knows he can, but we're not changing our law. We've already done that.
Knew that. Okay.
I mean, you can still check on what good it is to do it.
So the
but we-
state came and
Yes.
The state.
I don't
made-
remember hearing about that.
Received a
it was
letter
from
from
an
a
individual
telling us
delegate.
we were out of,
Yeah, the delegate
I'll forward it to you.
I don't remember.
Yeah, she did the bill, and she sent us a letter, you
We're out
know,
of
your law
compliance.
says you
Who
can do
was-
it to residents.
Of course, the individual.
Oh,
yeah,
please send us this letter. I want
The
to see what
sheriff
this is.
is,
Kind enough to
so
point
who
out our
cares?
violation.
We're
I'm
not
not sure
gonna
that's
change,
correct.
we're not gonna change our law.
Well, before we get too far afield, I mean, I guess to wrap up the solar conversation, but also to step into MPRP, because I know we're running out of time here. You know, over the course of the last legislative session, I know that you guys tried to pursue a number of legislative alternatives to this. And then from our end, us, and then I know Pam and I in particular were working on trying to look into what other people were proposing as well to try to counteract MPRP. So going ahead into this coming year's session, you know, is there anything that is on your mind that you're interested in trying? Or from our end, what do you need from us to continue to be able to advance the cause against MPRP from the state level?
I continue to believe the number one way that dies is that the Trump administration decides to dictate to FERC what they're gonna do. I think the continual battle continues.
You're saying federal.
Yes, I continue to think, and I think the same with the solar panels. I think we saw that with US Wind because enough rural beach towns pushed back. And I continue to believe that the lobbying efforts, and I say lobbying efforts in a serious lobbying effort way, and it is at the federal level, it will be a battle between big tech and which is powering data centers and the power needs that are coming over the next 5 years versus the traditional Trump base that sits in most of the counties that are getting this impact done.
The former constituents.
And the winning way to kill it is to do exactly what the folks that fought US Wind did.
I would say what Josh, I totally agree, and Commissioner Vigliotti and I, we talked about writing to President Trump.
Yes.
And I know there was some concern about doing that from some folks. I think it would, I actually was trying to, at that time, and I admit, I started working on legislation and got into session and didn't find this answer. It may be easier now that the administration's been longer. I think a letter from our commissioner board and our delegation to the president, obviously copying the relevant agencies, asking for help and relief as it relates to probably, in that case, one letter about MPRP. I do agree also on, one of the reasons I think they're pushing solar so hard now is they see the writing on the wall for a lot of these phony baloney crony capitalist subsidies, and so they're pushing to try to get as much in as they can in a lot of places, which is a separate conversation, and we're running out of time. But I think if we could work together, our teams, and do a letter to the president with, and then also like, if it's the Secretary of Agriculture, if it's the Secretary of Energy, or
Right.
we need to determine, or maybe it's multiple people we copy. I think it may be the Department of Energy. It isn't that they can literally go tell FERC, you must stop this. It's not that FERC, and I made a mistake when this first all happened. I told people this has been ordered by FERC, that we need more power, not that they ordered MPRP. I found out it's not quite that simple. None of this has been simple. It's all been complicated. But FERC ultimately will have a role in figuring out how to judge what's really needed as far as energy power.
Right.
And so, you know, because it's been, people get frustrated. Where does the buck stop? Is it the utility? Well, we're not happy with the utility, but in fairness, they bid on a project that was given to them by PGM. So it's PGM. Well, PGM says, well, FERC told us we have to meet a certain amount. So it's all this cascading thing. And I think the answer, very much so, to at least slow it down further, if not stop it, is at the federal level. I also think that the hearing schedule the PSC just rolled out is very favorable to our constituents. Because and we had written a letter, I think you guys may have too, supporting
Yep.
the longer period for people to, all of that is good. Time is our friend, but so I totally support that idea, and I think we ought to try to do a letter in the next month off to the Trump administration, in my opinion.
A joint letter? Let's do it. I'm all in.
And speaking of letters, I don't know if you all saw this last session, but we did try to weigh in on more issues for the Board of County Commissioners last session. So whether it's something during session or outside of session, if you think that it's important that whether it's the whole General Assembly or a committee or just a specific member is hearing from the commissioners, please don't hesitate to reach out to me. And if there's something you're working on that you want extra support on, I'm going to try to connect with each of you between now and session, obviously, to talk strategy overall and strategy with how we can help you, and just go into session much more organized than last year. I had some things going on, but
Thank you very much.
oh, absolutely. But I do feel like we had more of a voice for the county last year, just by me being new and having a different style. So I want to make sure that that continues and grows. So if you feel that there's something that you're hearing behind the scenes that maybe I wouldn't even know about by just listening to a hearing or knowing what's going on in the hallways, don't hesitate to call me or reach out, because I want to try to help as much as I can to forward everything that is a priority to the commissioners, of course, but whatever else is going to benefit the county. And I'll try to do my best to communicate with the commissioners and Deb and Roberta and make sure that we do things as quickly as we can, because I know things move quickly, especially during session.
And I was told yesterday, I don't believe, well, I'm doubtful. I was told yesterday that our senator and our congressman in DC has our backs on MPRP, and I'm gonna send them an email and
I feel really comfortable.
I'm gonna ask them to confirm that.
I hope they will.
Yeah, I
I hope they
don't
will.
think we should copy them on the letter, but I do
Probably not.
think I'm gonna.
But we
ask-
should be talking to them, and
Oh,
we,
why
I know
not?
we met with the senator staff before, the previous senator and both the U.S. senators at that time, so we
Yep,
may not agree with them on some political issues, but we need all the help we can get.
they help us, I'll take it.
I apologize, Delegate.
I mean, I think, yeah, I know we talked about this letter, I don't even know how long ago, and I know that I can find it in my email, but the Stop MPRP folks, I mean, they had, and this was actually, I think it was right before the president was getting sworn in, so that just shows you the time frame we're talking about, but, I mean, she gave very detailed, specific things that suggestions on what we should ask for in the letter.
When we could find who to ask for from it. rather than-
Yeah. It was
right.
also a weird time because, secretaries weren't in their positions yet and whatnot, and maybe things have changed, but they came up with very good things that we should ask for, and I can find that, and I think we should include that, I know we're not just gonna send a letter and say, MPRP, they're bad, please stop it, but it was some really good action items that they came up with.
And I just would say, keep in mind how this administration works, right? It's very relationship driven, right? So I think a lot about like someone like Bob Ehrlich, and someone like, who is the person that's going to get this to be something that was not just a letter to an inbox,
Right.
but something that said, oh, I now care about this. I care about this because the group called Bob Ehrlich, and Bob Ehrlich, who helped him immensely in Southern Pennsylvania, got there, and then all of a sudden it's an issue-oriented thing, and you map it out and say, look, this runs from Hanover to Harrisburg to all the way through yada yada yada, and it's like, that is right in my base territory, or Trump country, and or someone within the administration recognizes that, and then therefore I'm going to make this something I care about. I don't think that my read on a lot of this stuff is that the conceptual, it goes to the chief of staff that works there, that gets read, that then gets forwarded through. It's a lot more relationship-driven management.
And
The folks I know there as well.
and that makes
Yeah,
sense.
I figured.
And just for the record, having conversations with, federal representation, their staff, they've been very amicable and very, very receptive to trying to find some kind of solution at the federal level, because it isn't just a question of this particular project, but how do you prevent something like this from happening again in the future? And there are certain federal laws and codes that would have to be changed in order to prevent something like that. But this letter, I think, is a phenomenal idea, and I would love to be able to help write it.
Back to what he was saying with, it's kind of, I don't work in the Trump administration, I just, I read what I read, and obviously AI is a big thing. This whole project is closely tied to all that. The contractor, they are very well politically connected. I run into him at all kind of functions. I run into him in DC. I ran into him at the RNC convention in Milwaukee. I feel like I see, when I bump into him around a corner, it's like I, ran to a ghost or something. I'm like, why are you here? I'm like, oh everybody. So they've got friends in high places. I mean, obviously I'm not trying to we'll do the letter and stuff like that, but I don't know how high up, if they can pick up the phone and call up a secretary in his administration. I have no idea. But back to the legislation, I mean, that was probably the most disappointing, but which, you can make a top 100 things you were disappointed in coming out of session every year. But that was the biggest disappointment. I mean, I was keeping track. We had, I think, over 3 dozen bills. Some were directly related to the power line, a lot were indirectly, but it still would have affected the power line project in some capacity. And this wasn't just they weren't just all Republican bills. There were a lot of them were Democrat bills that were cross-filed, one Republican, one Democrat. And I think at the end of the day, I want to say of those 3 dozen, maybe 2 passed, 1 got vetoed, and the one that did pass, I mean, it wasn't much of anything. I mean, it was so disappointing. And I mean, several of us stood up so many times on the floor. I mean, every opportunity we got to bring up and remind the whole body about the power line and what it was doing, we took the time to do that. And it just, I don't know if it was, I mean, Justin talked a lot about this, but that committee was consumed by trying to find a solution to the energy crisis. Did they find a solution? No, I think the 3 bills that they produced were hot garbage. The governor vetoed one, and I don't think those 2 bills are going to do anything to help. Well, the one bill is the bill that has to do with the solar panels on ag land, so that's certainly not helping us. And I don't think any of the bills are going to do one thing to help anybody with their bills. Anyhow, maybe this year, like I said, I don't think anything was solved, but maybe that committee, maybe they're going to go into January and thinking well, fix that one, and they'll have a little bit of room on their plate to actually be able to listen to us about these different power line related bills. Maybe. But I know that that was the only thing, that's not the only thing, but that was their primary focus for the 90 days was how are we going to solve the energy crisis? How are we going to take these 250 random bills and let's try to, pull little pieces out of them and create these Frankenstein bills that aren't going to do anything.
Do we want to say any more about volunteer fire companies or trucks? We kind of covered it in a letter, but.
We did. I don't know if anybody else has anything to add. That's an ongoing issue, obviously. We're trying to work through that.
Yeah, I think it
Other
just dovetails
topics?
with the other ones.
Yeah.
We're done?
Good meeting.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you, guys.
Thank you.